Welcome back to Bullet Basics. Today is a controversial topic, and that is, what is a slide stop / slide release? Why it's controversial is a whole nother story. However, we do have a marketing message, so before we get into our video, we're going to send it over to Norm. Norm has been working hard. I don't know what he has prepared, but he's been working hard, so we're going to send it over to him for our marketing message. All right, Norm, I always look forward to these meetings. What you got for me? Well, I haven't had that much time to come up with this marketing plan, so it's going to be really rough. Well, no, you've had 2 weeks to come up with something. I'm gonna need more time on this one. Oh, okay. Well, hey, Norm, you're getting better, and we appreciate every effort that you put into it. At least you had a plan this time. Okay, so let's define this button right here. What is this button? There is so much in this industry. Man, I've had so many people talk about this, and people correct me when I say it wrong or whatever about what this button is. So we're going to talk about what it is, what it isn't, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how to use it the proper way. So this is technically called a slide lock. Now, the evidence that I have for that is based on, we looked at a bunch of gun manuals actually, and I have it on my computer here. We looked at a bunch of gun manuals just to see what they call it, right? They design the gun and they name it, so what do they call it? And on this, we actually wrote an article on this, and it's called, what is it, a slide stop or slide release? And then kind of how we consulted gun manuals. That's on our website, bulletbasics.com. But anyway, we consulted several manuals on this, and I have it here, so I'm reading it for you. The M&P manuals, the Smith & Wesson M&P, Glock, Koenig, SIG, all the P220, 224, 225, 226, 27, 29, and 239, the P365, the Springfield XDM line of pistols, CZ P10C, CZ75, Beretta 92FS, and Beretta IPX. So several manufacturers, and more than this actually, but those are just the ones we listed. And every single one of them, without fail, referred to that as something that stops the slide in the rearward position only. None of them talked about it as it being a slide release. Now, they did use different verbiage. For example, the M&P line said slide stop versus Glock that said slide stop lever. There's another one, slide stop lever. Oh, SIG says slide catch lever, right? But every single one of those has to do with when the gun is fired and there's an empty magazine in the gun. When the slide comes back, it engages the slide stop lever, which then holds the slide in a rearward position. So that's what it's technically called, and that's what we try to call it. But there's a big but there, because all the manuals also do another thing. But that is how it works. And so slide stop, slide catch, slide stop lever, whatever they're calling it, that's technically what it is. However, so many people, including myself, all the time refer to it as a slide release, because other people will then come in when they've put a new magazine in the chamber, in the mag well, and they're ready to put a new round in the chamber. They drop it by pulling down on the slide stop as a slide release. And so there's a lot of people, and the controversy really comes in, not necessarily in the name, but then kind of the action that's associated with it, and therefore it becomes the name. People call it the slide release, and that's why people will correct. And so is that a good thing or is that a bad thing to use it this way? That's what we're going to talk about next. But I think it's pretty unanimous with all the manufacturers that it's technically, if you want to be technical, it's a slide stop, slide catch, slide stop lever, all those things that we've talked about already. However, in practice, in use, it's either way, and that's why I just don't think it's worth wasting your time on learning the differences between the two, or not even learning the differences, but caring about the differences. Call it whatever you want, because every single one of those manufacturers, except one, says to use it, or says that you can use it as a slide release, not just a slide stop. So, for example, I'll pull those same ones out. There's certain verbiage that's used within the gun manuals that say you can use it that way, except for the M&P series never mentions it. They also don't mention that you can't use it as a slide release. However, Glock says to use it to pull down on the slide stop to get the gun back into action after you've put a new mag in. Koenig says to use it by pulling down on the stop. All the SIG manuals use that. Springfield CZ manuals and the Beretta manuals. They all say to pull down. They say either to pull down or to pull over the top. Now, I can't imagine a world in which these manufacturers would make these guns and then recommend at the same time that you shouldn't pull down on the lever or whatever to get the gun working again and ready to fire if there was some damage or problem that was going to be happening to the gun. And so our whole philosophy is that it really just doesn't matter. If you'd rather, when the gun is backward or the slide is in the rear position, if you'd rather come up and over the top and let it fire, do it. If you think that you'd rather pull down on the slide stop to get it to fire again, do it. The manufacturers, all of them except for the M&P, say that that's totally fine. And not only that, they say, most of them say that's how you do it. And so that's where we're going to leave it. You can choose. It's not worth your time differentiating between the two in practice. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a couple of reasons why you would use it as a slide release and a couple of reasons why you may not want to use the slide stop as a slide release. So let's get into those. Okay, so the first reason is that it's just going to be faster, right? If you have put a new magazine in, it's in the rear position, you put a new magazine in, all it requires, I guess I'll do it on this side, all it requires is to pull your thumb down, nothing else, right? Whereas to get it on the over-the-top method, you have to come with your other hand, let it slide forward, and then get back in, right? Versus just doing like that. Way easier, way faster, and that would be the reason to do that. That would be one reason, right? The next one is it does the job, right? If you're trying to get the gun back in the fight, or really just back into ready to fire and ready to put more rounds down range, it gets the job done. You're accomplishing what you're setting out to accomplish, and so that would be another reason to use it. The last one I'd say is that manufacturers suggest it, and that's not to be taken lightly, in my opinion. Now, do we listen to manufacturers exclusively? No, because at least their marketing teams tend to exaggerate things or alter things in slight ways. And so should we take that at face value? Not necessarily. However, when there's something like that that could be ruining the gun, I just can't imagine that they would say, hey, yeah, use it this way, but it's going to break your gun, so, and so I just can't imagine that. And so that would be another reason. The manufacturers are saying, look, if you want to do this, this is the way to do it. And a lot of them use it that exclusively. They don't say use the over-the-top method, whereas some do. Okay, so those are really the main reasons, and I think they're very strong and valid reasons for doing that. But if you prefer to do it the over-the-top method, there are reasons where using it as a slide release is probably not a good idea, and so we'll go over those next. The first one would be that, the argument that people make is that this, trying to pull it like this down, is a fine motor skill. And so pulling it down, you may not be able to do that, especially if you're in a self-defense situation, you're in a life or death situation where there's high stress and you can't use your fine motor skills anymore. So you would come over the top instead. That's a valid argument. There's lots of people that make that argument. Others would contend that so is this, right? Pulling the trigger is a fine motor skill. And so if you can train to do that, you can also train to do the other. You're going to have to draw your own conclusions on that, but that's just the argument. The next one would be, is that I've heard this one before, I don't really see it in practice, is that if you pull down on the slide release, the edge of the slide lock, the edge of the slide lock wears down over time. Instead of pulling back and letting the slide lock come down, it's just kind of carving off the edge, and so it's not going to lock open as efficiently as it used to. And so you can take that one for what it's worth. I've never seen, in the dozens and dozens of guns that I've owned and the hundreds that I've shot, I've never seen a problem with that. So, take that for if that's something that worries you, then go for it. Another argument for not using the slide stop as a slide release with your thumb would be that it can cause malfunctions. And the argument here is that when you use the over the top method, you're pulling it all the way back and kind of slingshotting it forward to give it as much momentum as it can to pick that round up and go into the chamber. People contend that just pulling down on the slide release doesn't get enough momentum, and it's more prone to jamming as that round goes up into the chamber. Again, I've done this hundreds of times. Other people have done it thousands of times. I don't use it. I tend to use the over-the-top method, by the way. Don't think I've mentioned that. And that's just because I'm a lefty, but we'll talk about that in a second. Whereas you can slingshot it and you reduce the likelihood of that jamming action happening. And people do this thousands, millions of times out there, and there just really aren't any jams. So I don't know that that's a valid reason, but if that's something you worry about, geez, just use the over-the-top and get proficient with that. Okay, another reason, and I have one here, would be with smaller guns like the Hellcat here. it's harder to do that with. There's less space. The recoil spring is a little bit more stiff. It tends to be harder to manipulate that way. And so with smaller guns, it may just be easier to just slingshot that over the back. And I tend to agree with that. They loosen up over time, and it's usually not that big of a deal. But that's something that you may want to do, because these, just engaging that slide release action is kind of hard to do with small guns, whereas the bigger ones, it's a lot easier. The last point I wanted to make is for us lefties, the 10, 11, 12, however many percent of us that are lefties, there can be a problem that some guns do not have it on the other side. And so if I'm trying to use the slide release as a lefty after I put a new mag in, I'm just out of luck unless I try to do some weird thing with my index finger over here. The only method to do, or the best method to do, the fastest, would be to use the over the top and rack it backwards, right? And so that's kind of a compelling argument for most people to use, not just for lefties, but for most people to use it, because you can get really proficient with the racking it over the top, and you can use any gun and not have to worry about it. Obviously, there are some guns that come with a slide lock on the other side, and engaging that for lefty isn't a problem, but I'd rather not have to worry about picking up any gun and being able to know that, hey, I'm doing it right and it's going to work the same way every time. And so you're going to have to choose for yourself. The controversy is shocking that people care about this so much, but you don't have to. Just know it's technically a slide stop, but it can be used as a slide release according to the manufacturers themselves and according to millions of people in practice. Other than that, we hope you subscribe. We hope we earned your subscription today, and subscribe, give us comments and feedback in the comments below. Just with any gun channel, not even just with ours, engage, right? Let's show YouTube that this is something gun channels on YouTube deserve to be there, and that they want to make money off of us, right? That's the whole point of YouTube. And so that we're a very lucrative audience for them, and that getting rid of us, or at least restricting us, is not worth it. And so engage with gun channels as long as they're making good content. Watch their videos all the way through and then engage. Thank you so much for watching. Be strong. Be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. Hey, I'm just testing out kind of end of the video taglines that all those guys do. That one's not taken still, right?